This week on America and the Courts, Justices Sandra Day O'Connor and Stephen Breyer. First, we'll feature Justice O'Connor at a statue dedication ceremony honoring former Supreme Court Justice Robert Jackson. He was nominated to the court by President Franklin Roosevelt in 1941 and served as an Associate Justice for 13 years.
I'm honored and pleased to introduce the United States Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. This is a wonderful occasion for Jamestown and for all of us who are lucky enough to be here and see the unveiling of this absolutely handsome and strong statue of Justice Jackson. We're remembering today a product of this community and of its public schools. The most treasured honor that anyone can receive is one that comes from one's hometown, from those who knew the honoree first and best. So it is today. Robert Jackson, one of the finest justices ever to sit on the bench of the United States Supreme Court, grew up on a farm close to Jamestown. It was here that he attended the Jamestown Elementary and High School, that he married, had his children, and practiced law. It was here that he spoke in 1935 at the dedication of the new Jamestown High School building. He said then, "If you believe, as I believe, that democracy is the form of government best adapted to our people, then you must regard the public school as the most fundamental concern of our society. Democracy will always call most of its leaders from the ranks of humble men, and to equip them, it must provide free education to the sons and daughters of disadvantaged homes." On graduating from Jamestown High School, Jackson read law in a Jamestown law office, spent 1 year in Albany Law School, and was admitted to the New York bar at age 21. Now, this is the last justice of the Supreme Court to have gotten there without ever going to law school. That's an amazing record. Now, for a lawyer or a judge, reading a Jackson Supreme Court opinion is a special treat. He wrote always with clarity, with style, and with persuasion. His opinions are just studded with wonderful passages and quotations. For example, he wrote of the court that we are not final because we are infallible, but we are infallible because we are final. He wrote strongly in support of individual liberties and in opposition to arbitrary government action. In his opinion for the court in Board of Education versus Barnett, which held a school child may not be compelled against his will to recite the Pledge of Allegiance, he said, "The very purpose of the Bill of Rights was to withdraw certain subjects from the vicissitudes of public controversy, to place them beyond the reach of majorities and of officials." In the Korematsu case, upholding the wartime confinement of Japanese Americans in relocation camps, Justice Jackson dissented, saying, "Now, if any fundamental assumption underlies our system, it is that guilt is personal, not inheritable." And of course, he was justified many years later by the common assumption that that opinion was, the majority opinion was wrong, and Congress finally rectified it many, many years later. President Roosevelt had promised to nominate Justice Jackson as Chief Justice when Chief Justice Stone retired. But it never came to pass. President Roosevelt died and was succeeded, of course, by President Truman. Truman asked Justice Jackson to serve as chief prosecutor of the Nazi war criminals in Nuremberg in 1945. Jackson believed that the long months he spent in Nuremberg were the most important, enduring, and constructive of his life. After 10 months in this place and 17,000 transcript pages of testimony, 19 of 21 defendants were convicted and sentenced. As Jackson put it, the evidence is there with such authenticity and in such detail that there can be no responsible denial of these crimes in the future, and no tradition of martyrdom of the Nazi leaders can arise among informed people. And he hoped to create a precedent that would make explicit that to persecute, oppress, and do violence to individuals or to minorities on political, racial, or religious grounds is an international crime. Today, 50-plus years later, the world is again witnessing an attempt to apply that precedent in new war crimes proceedings in Brussels and in Rwanda, to serve again as the voice of human decency following the unspeakable atrocities in Rwanda and in Bosnia-Herzegovina. We're following the path beaten by Robert Jackson for the protection of basic human liberties. Robert Jackson is a product of this wonderful community, of its soil, of its people, its public schools. It was here that he learned his lifelong curiosity for knowledge, an inspiration to seek self-improvement by hard work, and the courage to take responsibility. He knew education was not the formal years of study, but a lifelong process. With your statue of this great man, you will help everyone who sees it to further his or her own inspiration and his or her own self-improvement. Congratulations to Jamestown and to all of you. Thank you.